In this video, I'm going to be telling you what I love and what I really don't love about this Rover 75 diesel. So I've owned this Rover 75 diesel for a few months now, and I think it's a good time to talk about what's great and what's not so great about this sort of last final fling for Rover. It could have been brilliant, and it somehow isn't, but we'll focus on the positives to start with. I adore the styling. I know the styling is not to everyone's cup of tea, but I think especially in this copper leaf red metallic, I think this is a gorgeous colour, a gorgeous car. I love the retro details, and I think it did retro a lot better than the Jaguar S-Type, which came out the same year, the same motor show, in fact, the Birmingham International Motor Show of 1998. It just somehow manages to be smoother. And I really like the chrome strips. It just breaks up what would otherwise be a fairly slab-like car. Got this retro nose. I've never been all that keen on these dowdy indicators down here, but at least they're a long way from the headlamp, so there's practical benefits there. Of course, we've got the Rover grille. I just think that is a classy old snout right there. And you've got the chrome trim continuing, slightly broken on this one around the top of the windscreen. This isn't the best example, to be fair. There are far better examples, but this is kind of representative of what's still out there at the cheaper end of 75s. This is a diesel, so it's got 115 brake horsepower, 4-cylinder BMW diesel engine under the bonnet, and I think that's probably where we should turn our attentions next. So I'd love to say here is the diesel engine, but it's all covered by this plastic cover. It's a very nice diesel engine, very good low down torque characteristics, and it pulls very smoothly. There's not any noticeable turbo lag because you can barely feel the turbo. I suspect this one might have lost a few horses along the way, but it is a pig to work on. Got all the belts and everything down this end of the engine, and it's a bit of a nightmare because it's an engine designed for rear wheel drive BMWs 3 Series, but it was also fitted to the Freelander. And it's a good engine, very efficient, very good economy. If I just drop the bonnet down again, you can expect sort of high 40s, maybe even low 50s with a manual. The automatic will be more like low 40s. But if we move inside, because it is horrendous out here, that's probably not a bad idea. Things get a lot better, I think. I think the strength of this car really comes out inside. Again, this is not the best example of a Rover 75, but I quite like it. I think it's a very classy interior. I love these dials, especially the way they light up. Can't really see it on a day like today. Turn the illumination up a bit. There we go. They sort of glow quite pleasantly. Very nice dials. We've got a bank of warning lights up ahead of the driver as well. This one apparently 33,000 miles into service, but I suspect it just hasn't been reset, probably because the trip is actually broken. And because this one's missing the plastic, I can actually adjust the speedo position. I've just discovered there. That's interesting. And we'll turn that off again. This one's had a normal stereo fitted, but we've got digital climate control, lots of really nice wood. I don't know if it's fake or not, but it's certainly pleasant. My gimbal is getting slightly confused because the car is parked on an angle, but yeah, it's very classy in here. But the flip side is it's also very claustrophobic, and that has proved to be probably the worst aspect of the car for me. It's very, very cozy. You feel very claustrophobic. All these panels and pillars seem very close to your head, and I don't like that aspect at all. And I also find the seat a little uncomfortable. It's just tilted slightly incorrectly for me. And I remember that I had a 75 Connoisseur with a full leather interior, very classy, very beautiful interior, but again, just really very, very cramped. And you find when you've started putting stuff in the footwells, which I can't demonstrate because I've turned on face track, that's clever, you end up, I've got a bag down there, there's no room for legs. Other cars, notably the Vauxhall Vectra I owned before this, it actually had space for my girlfriend's legs and a picnic bag, and it's the same story in the back. The back is also very, very cramped, so let's go and have a nose there. So here we are in the rear, and again it's quite claustrophobic. Big chunky pillars behind my head, quite a low roof line, and well, the seats are sculpted, so I've actually got some space for my knees. My feet are jammed hard under the seat in front, and there's a big, well, not a transmission tunnel, but there's a big tunnel coming down the middle, which just makes the situation worse, if anything. So as family transport, sadly the Rover 75 has not delivered, and the boot doesn't help with that. So let's go and have a look at that next. So here we are, we're going to open up the boot of the Rover 75. We've got the wheel brace just floating around in there. It looks like a decent sized boot, but it somehow manages not to be. It is quite shallow, it's quite an awkward shape, there's a lot of wheel arch intrusion going on, and because the back end of the car tapers in, it ends up being a much smaller space than you probably realise. And again, as family transport goes, it's proved woefully inadequate. You can't actually get much in there. Being a saloon doesn't help. The estates have a bit more space, but again, it's called a tourer, and it's not really designed with out and out practicality in mind. But I think, especially on this rather horrendous day, the best thing to do next is go for a drive. Now, the driving experience is a right mixed bag. So there's some things I really like about driving this car. There are some things I definitely do not like. One of the things is the gear change. It's just not nice. It's very clunky, and you have to be quite firm with it. The clutch is also quite heavy. I believe that is an issue in the diesels, that effectively the springs can work harden and make the clutch heavier. I've had worse, but it's not brilliant in a prestige car. Also, the clutch hydraulics are a weak point, which is BMW's doing. Plastic slave cylinders in the bell housing, so you have to take the gearbox off to deal with the issue. Alternatively, the master cylinder can go, and that tends to leak hydraulic fluid all over the footwell, so that's also not brilliant. I'm going to start the engine up, and I mean, it's a diesel, it's a 4-cylinder diesel engine. It doesn't sound the most refined. I can see you vibrating away there, so we'll get moving fairly quickly. It's quite a big steering wheel, but I quite like it. I like the driving position, apart from that enclosed feeling, the feeling of claustrophobia, which I remember well from my first 75. But you know, driving around this car park, you start feeling the good qualities of this car shine through. The suspension is remarkable. It is very supple. It's not quite Citroen good, but it's in that ballpark of being really very, very smooth without hampering the handling. These cars ride and handle very well. Probably a bit too much body roll for some people, but I would prefer comfort. I'm not tackling the Nürburgring on a daily basis. I'm driving on British roads, so I want the comfort, and this car provides it. It's just a shame the seats don't quite match. I found the driving position in my 45, the smaller Rover, much better, even though that was a much older design. Rather weird. I like the wipers as well, a very good wiping pattern. There can be a bit of a triangle of doom issue, but it's only minor. The amount of glass those wipers cover is very impressive. And the engine is not a strong point. I don't think this is the most healthy engine, so it's perhaps not entirely representative, but especially uphill, it really struggles. And I've got a warning light on. I don't even know what for. I thought it was brake fluid, but perhaps not, because it seems to have come back despite topping that up. And that's another thing, really. These cars are getting to that age. I mean, they're 20 years old, so they are getting a bit niggly, and they're not necessarily DIY friendly niggly. They require a specific diagnostic computer, a T4 I believe it's called, to talk to the whole car. Some computers can talk to bits of it because of the BMW software, but yeah, that becomes a pain. They're not ODB2 compatible, so most code readers can't really talk to these cars. But yeah, generally they're not joyous as DIY proposition for working on, but to be fair, I think that's true of an awful lot of modern cars such as this. but it is peaceful, it is smooth, it is relaxing. You know, relax, it's a Rover, could never be more true than this car. And you think the 75 replaced the 800. The 800, very good car, but the 800 always suffered for its Honda underpinnings. There wasn't really enough suspension travel to offer true levels of comfort. So the 75, far better in that regard. I'm keeping my coat on because one downside of these diesel engines, they're very thermal efficient. So they do take a long time to warm up, even when the thermostat, as on this one, is in good condition. It just takes a while to get there, which is why they have a supplementary Webasto diesel burning heater, just to try and get heat in the engine, make them speed up a bit more quickly, which seems perverse when you think about it, but you're having to burn fuel specifically to warm the engine up. But there we go, that's how this thing functions. Switch gear, the light switch is too far away. I prefer lights. I would prefer the lights to be controlled by twisting the end of that stalk. We have got variable intermittent on the end of this stalk. Maybe there was a computer thing and you used that stalk for that. I'm not sure, I can't remember. It's a long time since I had my Connoisseur. But you know, the specification's quite good. We've got electric windows, central locking, air conditioning, quite a lot going on, because this is the mid-range club rather than the top range Connoisseur. And this one was built before Project Drive started taking too many of the nice features out of the cars, of desperate cost-cutting measures, because this is a car built in 2001. By that stage, BMW had sold MG Rover to the Phoenix 4, who I forget what the Phoenix called themselves. It was basically management bought out Rover, but they never had the money to invest in newer models, because developing new cars hideously expensive. Look how much money Tesla is burning. It's frankly staggering. I'm not entirely sure where their profits are going to come from at any point. But yeah, Rover found the hard way that selling cars and developing cars very, very difficult. And it's a shame, because there were new models in the offing, but the money ran out first. So Project Drive, desperate attempts to cut those costs back and increase the profit margin on the cars. But yeah, very smooth, very relaxing. It is a car that does eat up the miles very nicely indeed. Modern cars just tend not to ride this well. I don't think the S-Type rides this well. S-Type rear wheel drive perhaps has the edge in the handling department, but for most people I don't think they'd necessarily notice that fact. Most people are not racing drivers. And I like the ambience. This is a nice place to sit. And again, that isn't always true of cars developed in the late 1990s. And I love the looks of the car. It's a car I can just look at and go, oh, I'm proud to own that. I think that is a really smart looking car. But ultimately, I think I'm forced to conclude, I just don't really get on with Rover 75s. This is my second bite of the cherry, the second attempt. And I think it has been more successful than the first attempt. I think I've enjoyed this car more than I enjoyed the first one. Not helped by the first one having a completely totaled third gear synchromesh and very, very juddery brakes. This one actually drives pretty well. And here we are, we're doing just over 1,000 revs in fifth gear at 35 miles an hour in a 40 limit. I'm taking it a bit easy because we've got snow falling out of the sky at the moment. It is comfortable, it is nice, and there's enough retro touches to just make you feel this is something a bit different from the ordinary. And by the late 1990s, a lot of cars were very, very ordinary indeed. Yeah, the cut of the rug, this is nice. So I don't think the Rover 75 is the best car ever made. There's too many flaws for it to hold that, but I can very easily see what the appeal of these cars is. I think these days you're really going to have to entrust looking after one to a specialist. That's going to be potentially quite expensive, but then most people these days are buying a Rover 75 as a collector's car, and that's a weird thing that has kind of happened since they were in production. They were such a jump forward for Rover, but they developed a huge following very early on, and I think that's nice. I think a car that can be considered a classic even when it's brand new, clearly doing something right, isn't it? So really the Rover 75 was a victim of circumstance and a company that just simply ran out of the money. But here we go, we'll open her up a bit. It's not a nice noise. It's a horrible gear lever as well. It's not nice to hold. So I think V6 automatic really is the way to go on a Rover 75. Unless you find one of the rare V8s which had the 4.6 litre Ford Mustang V8 and rear wheel drive. Quite remarkable. Would love to drive one of those, see what they're like. Of course, if all this is just a bit too genteel for you, there is the MG ZT, which is more than just a rebadge. The MG ZTs sometimes had a bit more power, and they had different suspension settings, and things like the subframes were mounted to the body with aluminium rather than rubber, so they lost a bit of the refinement. I've never driven an MG ZT. I would like to, just to see how it compares, because I love the feel of the 75 to drive. This is cruising along effortlessly. It's very much what I like. It's not huge fun to chuck into a bend really quickly, but you know it'll get you round the bend. It's that sort of a vibe going on. It just feels assured rather than entertaining. And to be honest, in a road car that you just want to get from A to B, that's fine. If it just goes where you point it, then for most people you want no more than that, really. And the fact you can do it in such an accomplished manner while riding so comfortably, yeah, that is well done to the Rover engineers, because yeah, that's not generally how BMW do things. They don't usually get the ride as compliant as this. So there you go, that's some of my thoughts on the Rover 75. It's just not for me, but even now I'm looking at this car thinking that is beautiful. The colour, oh, just wonderful. But I think for me, ultimately, I would rather have a 45. I think the 45 doesn't give away much interior space. It does give away interior ambience. Those dials and the wood look much nicer in the 75 than the 45. But in terms of actual everyday use, I think a 45 ticks more boxes. Or the sporty MG ZS versions. They look a lot of fun as well. So yeah, don't send me hate mail because I'm not loving the Rover 75. There's a lot I admire here. It just isn't the car for me. In the same way that a Citroen 2CV is not the car for many people either. But I hope you've enjoyed that. That is probably going to be my final video on Rita the Rover. She is provisionally sold and should be on her way. Something else is coming in. But what, I hear you ask? Well, you'll just have to wait and see. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget you can head to the store and buy lovely beanie hats. These are £9 and very warm, plus postage and packaging. And look forward to seeing you in a future video. Farewell.